There was blood on the carpet and her voice in my head saying, "If you ever love me, vanish. Right now." That's how this started. Not with love, not with betrayal, with panic, with sirens in the distance, with the taste of metal in my mouth and my wife looking at me like I was already dead. I don't know why she said it. I didn't ask. I just left. Wallet, keys, even my shoes, gone. I sprinted out the back door in socks soaked with God knows what, heart pounding like it wanted to tear out of my chest. That was 5 years ago. People think vanishing is the hard part. It's not. Staying gone is. Try living without a bank account, without ID, without the right to exist. Try convincing motel owners to let you work the night desk for half rent. Try forgetting someone who told you they loved you and then handed you an unspoken death sentence. Yeah, didn't think so. The first year was silence. No calls, no cops, no headlines. Whatever happened that night, whatever I ran from, she made sure it never reached me. But that didn't mean it went away. I slept in storage units, church basements, a broken-down van with no windows. My name became Kyle, then Mark, then Nolan. I taught myself how to weld, fix small engines. I worked on junk that didn't belong to anyone. But I never stopped thinking about her. Was she alive? Was she safe? Was I the reason she wasn't? And then the postcard came. No name, no return address. Just 4 words in handwriting I hadn't seen in half a decade. You're not safe anymore. That's when I knew. She hadn't forgotten me. She'd protected me. And now something had changed. I didn't even pack a bag. I took a bus across 3 states, hitchhiked through 2 more. And when I finally saw her, in a hospital gown, hooked up to wires and barely conscious, I didn't even get a word out. She opened her eyes, looked at me, and dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. I ran to catch her. But before I touched her, a nurse grabbed my arm and said, "Sir, she's under federal protection. Who are you?" The nurse's hand gripped my forearm like a vice. She repeated the question, slower this time, like I was either deaf or lying. "Sir, who are you?" I opened my mouth, but my real name caught in my throat like a splinter. I hadn't said it out loud in so long that it felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Maybe it did. Maybe the man who used to be Julian Fisher had truly disappeared that night. And maybe this version of me, this tired, worn-down echo of who I used to be, wasn't supposed to come back. But she was here. Nora. Alive. Breathing. Barely. I looked past the nurse, through the sliver of curtain where Nora lay unconscious, pale and fragile like I'd never seen her. Her red hair was matted, her face thinner, jaw sharper. Something had drained her. The fire she used to walk with? Gone. Replaced by tubes and beeping machines and hospital-white stillness. The nurse didn't let go. "You can't be here. Security's on its way." So I ran. Again. I don't even remember my feet moving. 1 second I was there, and the next I was tearing down a stairwell, breath short, hands trembling like I'd just escaped prison. Maybe I had. Except this time, I didn't know whose prison I was in. I didn't stop until I hit a gas station 4 blocks down. I locked myself in the bathroom and sat on the floor. My reflection in the mirror didn't look like me, just a drifter with tired eyes and a 5-year-old secret rotting inside his chest. I had so many questions I didn't know where to begin. How was she still alive? Why was she under federal protection? And why the hell did someone send me a warning just before she collapsed? The next day, I made a mistake. I Googled her name. There were no recent articles, no criminal records. But there was one tiny mention on a local forum, a thread about whistleblowers that had been archived and half erased. Someone with a blurred-out name had dropped this comment under an anonymous thread. And F was never supposed to talk. They thought she wouldn't survive the fire. She did. Now they're watching her again. A fire? I hadn't heard about any fire. At least, not back then. But I remembered the night I left. The sirens. The smell of smoke. The red glow outside our bedroom window. That couldn't have been coincidence. And that's when I realized she never told me to disappear because she stopped loving me. She told me to run because someone else wanted me gone. I wasn't escaping her. She was saving me from them. But 5 years is a long time. Long enough for secrets to grow roots. Long enough for old ghosts to forget your scent. And long enough to make someone like me think maybe, just maybe, the danger had passed. But it hadn't. Because that night, I returned to the motel I was staying at, and someone had broken in. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was moved. But sitting in the center of the bed was a single item, one of Nora's old scarves. The same one she used to wear the winter we met. Wrapped inside it was a note. All it said was, "You're not listening. Leave again. For good this time." There were no fingerprints, no camera footage, no explanation, just a warning and a memory left behind like a noose on my pillow. But this time, I wasn't going to run. This time, I needed the truth, no matter what it cost. And the truth? It was going to start with the night of the fire. I spent the night sitting on the edge of that motel bed, staring at the scarf like it was a venomous snake. The pattern was unmistakable, navy with a faint silver thread running through it, frayed at one end where Kip, our old dog, had chewed it. I hadn't seen it since the week before I disappeared. There was no chance it got here by accident. Someone had been inside my room, standing exactly where I was sitting now, leaving me a relic of a life I wasn't supposed to have anymore. That night, I barely slept. When I did, I dreamed of fire. In my dream, the walls of our old apartment melted like wax, and I could hear Nora's voice somewhere on the other side of the smoke, not calling for help, but telling me to run. When I woke up, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone. But I wasn't scared anymore, not in the way I had been for 5 years. This was something else, a kind of cold fury. Someone had been pulling the strings of my life without my consent, and I was done letting them. I started digging. I found a library computer 2 towns over and spent hours combing through 5-year-old local news archives. That's when I finally found it. A tiny, 2-paragraph article buried under local incidents. Electrical fire in East Bridge Apartments. The headline read. The date? The night I disappeared. The location? Our building. It said 2 units were destroyed and multiple residents displaced. But here's the kicker. There was no mention of injuries, no mention of fatalities, and no mention of Nora's name anywhere. Just like it had been erased. I printed the article and stared at it until the ink smudged. All at once, something clicked in my head. A memory I'd buried so deep it only surfaced now. That night, just before she told me to disappear, Nora had been on the phone. She thought I was asleep. She whispered something I couldn't make out, but I remember 3 words clearly. They found him. Back then, it hadn't meant anything. Now it felt like a key in a lock. Who did they find? And why did it mean I had to vanish? The next few days I traced every thread I could. Old contacts, ex-coworkers, even the landlord who'd replaced me on the lease. Everyone had the same story. Nora had moved out weeks after the fire, paid cash, left no forwarding address. But one name came up twice, a man called Amos Rigg, supposedly a contractor who had helped with repairs after the fire, but whose name didn't appear on any official paperwork. So I drove 3 hours to the only address I could find connected to him, a rusting storage yard on the edge of an industrial park. The gate was unlocked. Inside, there were rows of shipping containers with faded numbers. It looked abandoned, but the air had that charged silence of a place someone still visits. I found the number painted in black on one of the containers, 57. It matched a scribble I'd seen on the back of the note wrapped in Nora's scarf. My pulse felt like a drum in my ears. Against every shred of self-preservation, I went inside. There were no lights. Just the glow of my phone screen cutting across stacks of old files, boxes marked with numbers, and a smell like charred wood. At the back, something caught my eye, a photograph, tacked to the wall with a rusty nail. It was Nora, taken at least 6 years ago, before everything. And next to her, with his face cut out of the picture, was a man in a gray suit. Underneath the photo, someone had written one sentence in marker. He still doesn't know. I stumbled back so fast I knocked over a crate. Papers spilled everywhere, burned invoices, doctored leases, photos of people I didn't recognize. And then, from the dark corner of the container, I heard a sound. Not a rat, not the wind. Breathing. Someone was in there with me. I turned, but before I could see, a hand shot out of the shadows and slammed the door shut. The door slammed shut behind me with a metallic echo that swallowed every other sound. I spun around, my phone barely illuminating more than a few feet in front of me, just enough to see the thin swirl of dust stirred up from the floor. Silence returned, thick and absolute. I held my breath, trying to hear past the hammering in my chest. There was someone in that container with me. I hadn't imagined the breathing. It was too distinct, too human, too close. "Who's there?" I said, my voice shaking despite my best effort to steady it. Nothing. Just the low hum of my phone and the distant creak of metal settling into itself. I took a step backward and hit something, soft but solid. Before I could turn around, a voice cut through the dark. Low, slow, and ragged. You should have stayed gone. I froze. Every hair on my body stood up. The voice didn't sound like a threat, not exactly, more like a fact. A tired, grim truth spoken by someone who'd been waiting far too long to say it. I turned and raised the light. It caught the edge of a man's face. Deep lines, a scar running from his jaw to his ear, gray hair that looked like it had been cut with a pocket knife. He stood in the corner like he'd grown out of the shadows, wearing a jacket too big for him and a look that didn't belong on any ordinary contractor. Are you Amos? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he nodded toward the photo still tacked to the wall. You remember the man next to your wife in that picture? I looked again. The one with the face cut out. I hadn't recognized him. Just the suit, the posture, something off about the way Nora was standing next to him. Too straight, too formal. That was her handler, Amos said, before she went rogue. I stared at him, trying to piece it together. Handler? You mean like FBI? Witness protection? He let out a dry laugh, then shook his head. No, not FBI. You're thinking too small. Let me ask you something. Did she ever talk in her sleep? The question caught me off guard. I nodded, slowly. Sometimes, yeah. Why? Did she ever say something about a program? About resetting the grid, or the name Dovetail? That word, dovetail. Something about it made my stomach turn. I couldn't remember hearing it before, not clearly, but it felt familiar, like a splinter that had been in my skin for years without me noticing. Your wife, Amos said, stepping forward, used to work for a private intelligence contractor that doesn't technically exist. Their job wasn't to protect the country. It was to control certain digital levers. Systems, infrastructure, people. Dovetail was one of their black programs. She was involved deep enough to know things people would kill to forget. And 5 years ago, she tried to disappear. Just like you. None of it made sense. And yet, everything suddenly fit. The strange phone calls, the fire, the fear in her voice the night she told me to run. She wasn't scared of me. She was scared for me. I had been living next to a woman carrying a secret that could burn down more than just our apartment. Why now? I asked. Why reach out after all this time? Why let me find her again? He crouched, picked up one of the folders that had spilled on the floor, and handed it to me. Inside were photos, grainy, taken through long-range lenses. One was of me in the motel parking lot, taken 2 days ago. Another was of me walking into the hospital. The third was of me sleeping. In the motel bed, taken from inside the room. They're tracking you now, he said quietly. That scarf wasn't a warning. It was a tag, a way to mark you. You brought heat back with you, and now it's going to find her again. You shouldn't have come back. My hands went cold. My first instinct was to run, again. But I couldn't. I had done that once, and it almost killed her. I wasn't going to be the coward a second time. Amos leaned in, close enough that I could smell smoke on his clothes. You want to help her? Then you need to know the truth about what she did, what she ran from, and what she gave up to keep you safe. Then he handed me a key. It was old, brass, with a tag labeled Ren 11. Go to the cabin in Harrow's Ridge, he said. It's off the map, no cell towers. You'll find what she left behind. But when you do, he paused, his eyes dark. Don't trust what you think you know about your wife. She was never who you thought she was. Before I could ask another question, he opened the door, stepped out into the fog, and vanished, just like I had, 5 years ago. I was left standing in a metal box full of burned secrets, holding a key to a place I'd never heard of, and the crushing realization that the woman I loved may have never actually existed at all. But I was going to find out, even if it meant I didn't come back. The road to Harrow's Ridge didn't appear on any GPS. I had to rely on Amos' crude sketch and an old logging map I picked up from a bait shop an hour outside town. The further I drove, the more the world unraveled around me. Paved roads turned to gravel, gravel turned to dirt, and the trees started closing in like they were swallowing the path behind me. I hadn't seen another car for nearly an hour, and part of me wondered if that was by design. Eventually, I found it, or what was left of it. The cabin looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Its roof sagged in the middle, like a dying animal, and one of the window panes was boarded over from the inside. But the key worked. The brass turned in the old iron lock with a rusty click, and when I stepped inside, It felt like I had just walked into a sealed tomb. Dust coated everything. The shelves, the counter, even the floor, which was scattered with pine needles as if the forest itself had started creeping in. But what struck me immediately was how deliberate everything was. Nothing about this place screamed random. It was organized chaos, faded maps pinned to the walls, coded notebooks stacked by the fireplace, wires running under the floorboards toward a steel case bolted beneath the bed. Whoever had lived here hadn't just been hiding. They had been watching. I moved to the steel case and used the same key Amos gave me. Inside were 3 items: a flash drive sealed in a waterproof bag, a leather-bound journal filled with Nora's handwriting, and a photograph, one I had never seen before. It showed Nora standing outside the cabin, smiling faintly at someone just off frame. Her smile wasn't the same one she gave me in our old life. This one was colder, sharper, like she was pretending to be someone else. There was a date written on the back. October 9th. 5 years ago to the day, the exact night I vanished. My hands trembled as I flipped open the journal and started to read. At first, it was all code. Literally, numbers, acronyms, strange sequences that looked like coordinates. I skimmed pages and pages of what I couldn't understand until suddenly the tone shifted. Her handwriting changed slightly, more hurried, like she'd begun writing in a rush. The next entry was different. It was written to me. "Jules, if you're reading this, it means you didn't stay away. I begged you to. I planned for every possibility, except you coming back. I want to tell you everything, but I don't know how much time you have. So I'll start with this. You were never supposed to be part of this. You were the one good thing I had left. That night, when I made you disappear, it wasn't because I stopped loving you. It was because I knew they were going to erase me. I just didn't want you erased with me." My heart sank as I kept reading. Nora had uncovered something during her time with the private intelligence group. Not an isolated crime or a secret project, but an entire network of surveillance planted in civilian infrastructure. Everything from municipal power grids to public transport systems had been silently embedded with kill switches, backdoors, control mechanisms. And Dovetail, the project Amos mentioned, wasn't just software, it was an activation system. Whoever held the final access key could shut down entire city systems in seconds. Not metaphorically, literally. Communications, transportation, electricity, water, all offline. Total controlled blackout. According to her journal, she had discovered a rogue element, someone inside the program trying to sell access to foreign buyers. When she raised concerns, they turned on her, staged the fire as a cover-up, framed her handler, and forced her into hiding. That was the night she made me vanish. What hit me hardest was her final paragraph. I read it again and again. "You probably hate me. I would too. But if I'm gone now, really gone, you have to make a choice. Bury this and live. Or finish what I started and run straight into hell. If you choose the second, you'll find the activation chain hidden inside the violin case in the attic. Destroy it. Or use it. But don't let it fall into their hands. They're still watching. They never stopped." I closed the journal slowly, trying to process the weight of what she had left behind. My wife, the woman I thought I knew, hadn't just been running for her life. She had been trying to stop the unthinkable. And now that I'd come back, I was in it too. I found the violin case exactly where she said it would be, covered in a tarp and buried under loose boards. Inside, cushioned in velvet, was a small black device the size of a walkie-talkie, unmarked except for a biometric scanner. There was also a second flash drive, labeled simply, "Dead Switch." And then I heard it. A faint whine outside. Not an animal. Not the wind. A drone. I killed the lights and dove to the floor, crawling toward the nearest window. Through the cracks, I saw them. 2 figures in tactical gear, moving silently between the trees, infrared scopes mounted to their helmets. They had found me. And now, they were coming for what Nora died trying to protect. The moment I saw the flash of infrared lenses sweeping across the tree-line, everything inside me snapped into survival mode. I crawled backward from the window, keeping low, heart beating so fast I thought it might give me away before I even moved. The drone had gone quiet, but I knew it hadn't left. That's the trick. Silence doesn't mean safety. It means the trap is already closing. I shoved the flash drives into my coat pocket and carefully lifted the violin case with the activation device still inside. I didn't even know if it was armed, if it could be tracked, if it had already betrayed my position, but I couldn't leave it. That wasn't an option anymore. If what Nora wrote was true, this thing could bring down cities. I wasn't about to let it fall into hands that operated under cover of shadows. The back door of the cabin was jammed, so I took a risk. I smashed through the boarded window and landed shoulder first in the wet dirt outside. Pain shot through my arm, but I didn't stop. I crawled behind a pile of rotted firewood and waited, barely breathing. Less than a minute later, I saw them. 2 men, moving like wolves. Not police. Not government. No identifying patches. These were off-books types, the kind whose records were purged before they were even born. They swept through the front of the cabin fast and efficient. One of them used a small handheld scanner, waving it across the room like he was searching for radiation. The other covered him with a matte black assault rifle, his finger always resting just above the trigger. These weren't the kind of people who issued warnings. If they saw me, it was over. I circled the perimeter of the property, moving slow and deliberate. I knew the woods well enough to avoid the noisy patches. Nora and I used to hike out here years ago, back before it was a place to hide things. But now every snapped twig made me flinch. Every squirrel darting through the brush sounded like a boot against leaves. It took me 40 minutes to reach the old forest access road where I'd parked my car. By the time I got there, the sun was low, bleeding gold through the canopy. I threw the case in the trunk and peeled out, driving blind through a road I couldn't see, trying not to panic. But panic is a funny thing. You think you're calm until you hear the helicopter. I don't know how long it had been following me. Could have been 10 minutes, could have been the whole way. It wasn't flying low, just a speck in the distance, tailing like a shark. I took a sharp turn off the road into a service path and killed the engine. I waited. Nothing. Then I heard it again, the faint churn of rotor blades circling high above, then fading. Maybe they lost me. Maybe they hadn't tagged the car. But I couldn't bet on maybe anymore. That night, I slept in the back seat of an abandoned barn 15 miles out, one hand clutching the violin case like a lifeline, the other holding Nora's journal. I reread her words by flashlight, slower this time, trying to absorb every piece of subtext. I kept circling the same line over and over again. The key isn't the device. The key is who holds the second voice. What did that mean? A second user? A biometric match? A code phrase? I didn't know. I had no technical training, no background in espionage or systems. I built furniture. I installed cabinets. And now I was holding the kind of power people would kill for, being hunted by men who didn't care who I used to be. But I had one advantage they didn't. Nora. Even if she was unconscious, even if she was under federal watch, even if she hadn't spoken to me in 5 years, she was still my wife. And she was the only person alive who could unlock this nightmare, because she was the only person who started it. The next morning, I did something reckless. I returned to the city. I knew it was a terrible idea. There would be eyes on every camera, every ATM, every alley. But I had to see her. I had to get to her before they did. Whatever was locked inside the device, whatever the dead switch drive controlled, it was tied to her. I could feel it. And something told me time was running out. I parked 5 blocks from the hospital and walked. Hoodie up, eyes down, trying not to get noticed. I entered through the emergency exit on the east wing and slipped into the stairwell. According to a contact I bribed at the front desk 2 days ago, she was in room 917, still under guard. But I had something new now, a name. A fake one, but it would get me access. I reached the 9th floor, stepped out, and stopped cold. The hallway was empty. Her room was open. And Nora was gone. No nurse. No police. No chart. No evidence she had ever been there. Just a single sticky note taped to the wall where her nameplate used to be. On it, a phrase written in Nora's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. Ren 11 was never the end. It was the entrance. That was the moment I realized something I hadn't considered. Nora wasn't just running from something. She wasn't being held. She had escaped. And she was sending me somewhere even darker than I'd been before. I stood frozen in that hospital hallway for a long time, just staring at that sticky note. The handwriting was definitely Nora's. That same slanted rhythm, the tight lowercase e she always made, the little hook on her capital W. She was here. She'd left this note herself, which meant she had escaped. Yes, but also that she knew I'd come back. She expected me to follow the trail, even now. Ren 11 wasn't the end. It was the entrance. The entrance to what? I pulled the note free and tucked it into my pocket, then slipped back down the stairwell, mind spinning with questions. Nora had always been good with words, with metaphors and double meanings. But this felt literal, like a code, or worse, a test, a way to see how far I'd go, and whether I deserved the answers waiting on the other side. I didn't sleep that night. I holed up in a cheap roadside motel under a false name and laid out everything I had. The journal, the photo, the drives, the device, and now this cryptic note. The wall above the bed slowly filled with pinned scraps of my unraveling life. I connected strings between phrases in her writing, names from Amos files, cities, dates, places I barely remembered. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces soaked in gasoline. Around 3 a.m., it finally hit me. Ren 11 wasn't just the label on the key Amos gave me. It was also a project name mentioned in Nora's journal. I hadn't noticed it before, maybe because I was too focused on the tech, the running, the fear. But she'd written something cryptic on the second-to-last page. Ren 11 failed because it was built on silence. But 12 will be built on blood. The numbers weren't sequential. They were locations. I remembered something else. Back when Nora and I still lived together, she once asked me in passing if I'd ever heard of an underground data vault near the river. I thought she was talking about a Cold War bunker, some conspiracy podcast junk. But now I wasn't so sure. I spent the next 2 hours scouring digital maps of the city's industrial zone. I didn't need to find the words Ren 12. I just needed to find something that didn't belong. Eventually, I found it. A property deed registered under a shell corporation, tucked between a recycling plant and an inactive steel mill. No signage. No public records of activity. But satellite images showed deliveries, not often, but recent. Large trucks, equipment cases, and most notably, a heavy steel elevator platform hidden beneath what looked like a water treatment facade. If Ren 11 was the entrance, Ren 12 was whatever they built underneath it. I packed everything I had and made the drive just after sunrise. I left my car in a drainage ditch a half-mile out and hiked the rest of the way on foot. The facility looked abandoned, rusted pipes, moss on the gates, padlocks that hadn't been touched in years. But I could feel the lie in the air, the humming tension of something active hiding beneath the stillness. The elevator was real, buried under a fake concrete slab that retracted after I removed a pressure pin. Nora had left it for me in the journal, buried in a sketch that I'd mistaken for a poem. I stepped onto the platform and pulled the lever. The whole thing groaned, then slowly descended into a chasm lit only by a cold blue light. What greeted me below wasn't a lab. It wasn't a bunker. It was something else entirely. It looked like a chapel. No pews. No altar. Just clean white walls, a vaulted ceiling, and in the center, a glass-walled room filled with dozens of servers humming with life. A man sat in front of them, back turned, typing slowly with gloved hands. When the elevator clanked to a stop, he didn't flinch. He simply said, "I was wondering when you'd show up." My breath caught. I didn't recognize the voice, but I recognized the name he spoke next. She said if you ever came back, to make sure you saw the truth with your own eyes. That's why I kept it running, even after she disconnected. I stepped closer. The glass shimmered slightly from the internal lights, like a fogged aquarium. The man finally turned around, and my entire body locked up. It was the same man from the cutout photo, the one beside Nora, her handler, the one Amos said was dead. Except he wasn't. He was right here, alive, smiling faintly with eyes that held nothing warm. "She never told you what Ren really was, did she?" he said. "She never told you why they had to erase her." I didn't answer. I couldn't. He gestured to the servers. "Your wife didn't just expose Dovetail. She hijacked it. She was planning to use it to dismantle the network from the inside. But she needed 2 biometric signatures to activate the core protocol. Hers." He trailed off. I didn't need him to finish the sentence. "And mine." I whispered. "No," he said, tilting his head. "Yours." The air went still. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed about Nora, about why she made me vanish, was shattered in that moment. I hadn't been collateral. I hadn't been protected. I'd been part of the plan all along. I stood there, staring at the man who had once controlled my wife's life, and now, apparently, mine too. His eyes studied me like I was a cracked cipher he'd finally begun to solve. Every breath I took felt heavy with the realization that I wasn't just a bystander in Nora's story. I was a failsafe, a key, one she trusted more than I ever understood. She built it around you, he said. From the very beginning. Every layer of encryption, every fragment of the dovetail core is locked to your biometric signature. She didn't just love you. She anchored the entire system to you. I felt the floor shift beneath that truth. It was like finding out your whole life was a map, and you were the destination. The man stood and walked toward a control panel near the glass room. If I wanted to, I could wipe this entire place in seconds. Burn it down, bury the servers, erase the last trace of her rebellion. But I didn't, because I want to see what she saw. I want to know what kind of man she trusted with the most dangerous access key on Earth. I didn't follow. Instead, I walked straight to the biometric panel mounted at the heart of the room. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. For a moment, I saw myself the way Nora must have, not as a coward, not as a runaway, but as someone she believed in enough to entrust with a revolution. I placed my hand on the scanner. The lights shifted from red to green. A deep hum began to rise from the servers, like the system had finally exhaled after 5 long years. The screen above me blinked to life, cycling through logs, old surveillance feeds, encrypted messages, and finally, a blinking prompt. Execute Liberation Protocol? I hesitated. The man behind me didn't speak. He just waited. And then I saw it. A final message embedded in the code. A video file. I opened it. Nora appeared on screen, sitting in the same cabin I'd just escaped. Her hair pulled back, eyes tired but burning with purpose. If you're watching this, you did it. You followed the trail, even when it hurt. Even when it was impossible. I knew you would. I'm sorry for everything I couldn't explain. I'm sorry I had to make you disappear. But I needed you to survive. Not just for me. For this. She looked off camera, as if watching something unseen. This system, Dovetail, it was meant to enslave cities, lock them in loops of fear and obedience. But we rewrote it. You and I. It doesn't destroy anymore. It frees. And now it's yours. She leaned closer, softer now. I love you, Jules. Not for what you did, but for who you never stopped being. Finish what we started. And then go live. The video ended. I stood still for a long moment. And then I pressed yes. The room erupted in light. The servers flared, cycling through command lines at speeds I couldn't follow. Behind me, the man nodded slowly, not in defeat, but in strange, resigned approval. He knew what this meant. The network was being dismantled node by node. The surveillance nets were crumbling. The back doors were sealing. Entire chains of digital control snapped. It was over. I didn't stay to watch it collapse. I left the facility, climbed back into the daylight, and didn't look back. Some things you don't need to see fall to know they're gone. 2 months later, I was on the coast. I bought a small place near the water. I build furniture again, not for profit, just for the joy of shaping things with my hands. The wind here doesn't carry sirens. The sky here doesn't feel like it's watching me. And Nora? She's alive. I got a letter a week ago. No return address. No signature. Just a pressed flower, the kind she used to tuck into her books, and a single line written in her handwriting. You're safe. And so am I, live well. I don't know where she is. I don't need to. Because for the first time in 5 years, I'm not running. And wherever she is, I know she isn't either.